Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today. A big welcome to our returnings and a big new welcome for anybody that's joining here us for the first time. A little bit about us. We are Pre-Health Shadowing. We're an international student organization that's nonprofit. It's women-led, minority-led, and it's nonprofit for medical advancement. We do want to accommodate for all of you guys' need and abilities and inquiries. So we do accommodate closed captions throughout all of the live sessions here through Zoom. So if you have any other more ideas or any inquiries to how we can make it more accessible and it meets your guys' needs and abilities, you can always feel free to email us at info@prehealthshadowing.com, and we'll be very happy to take all of you guys' concerns in. And you can save that email just for any inquiries that you have in the future, any questions, or any concerns that you can have on your mind. You can always feel free to email through that email. If you want to stay more into the loop of pre-health shadowing, you can always join our mailing list where we send all of our upcoming events, any updates within the organizations that we do. We are launching a new book that we're gonna have launched in April, so you can also join us for that. You can also join us through any of our social media platforms like Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and they all through the handle at pre-health shadowing. One thing that I really love about pre-health shadowing is that it just include everybody from everywhere. So please go ahead in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from us today. I am joining from Chicago, Illinois. Please go ahead in the chat. Let us know where are you joining from. Let's see the chat. New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Pakistan. Wow, awesome. Boston, New York, Canada, California. Trying to see if I got everybody. New Jersey, California. Thank you guys. It's awesome having all of you guys here today. If you are interested more to being part of pre-health shadowing, of course, as being a great host here today. What? Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Yeah, you can join us as a student volunteer or also as a team member on the board. They do differentiate within commitment and hours within the role. You can join as a volunteer student where you can help the departments through any work that they have within the jobs. It could be like the Department of Student Success, live sessions. We also have book and research, and you can join whatever that you feel interested in joining. One thing that I love about these roles is they're all fully remote and you don't have to worry about moving anywhere or traveling to anywhere. You can all do the job through your computer. And you can always apply today. We do have a form on our website that you can always feel free to tell us a little bit more about you, which role you're interested in, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Again, the roles do fill in with all of PHS. It could be like the IT department, the grant. We do have a research, we have a recurrent, we have an volunteer communication as well, and within more roles that you can fill in for. We also do have a high school program, which offers health and leadership educations for health students that are for high school students that are interested into going into pre-health or pre-med in college. You can always fill out applications through our form. It's very easy. Just tell us about yourself, what high school, and etc., and we will get back to you as well. Since we're a nonprofit and we do run on donations, it's very helpful to get that. So we do have a QR code here for you guys to scan. Please scan it. Whatever you can donate, it's very helpful for us. Even if it's $1, you can keep it with you, share it with anybody that you know that can donate. All of that money help us keep this program accessible and free for everybody. Throughout the sessions, I'm sure our professional here, we're going to have amazing lecture. We're going to learn a lot. Feel free to type your questions in the chat. We will have Q&A at the end, and then we'll be able to type your questions in the chat or unmute to ask them. Throughout the sessions, you are very free to take any good notes that you feel like it's important for you or that's insightful for you for the quiz or can be just for you for later or any resources that we will have shared. Anything that will help you, feel free to take good notes on. Since we are remote, it's very helpful to keep this more engaging and more accessible to everybody. So it will be great if you can have your cameras on. That way we can keep it more engaging and as we go. That's it on my end. I'm gonna go ahead and give it to our amazing professional here to go ahead and share on their presentation.
Hi, everybody. Welcome from all over the world. This is so fun. I'm excited to be here. I'm Dr. Jonathan Wisco. I'm an associate professor of anatomy and neurobiology at Boston University at the Chobanian and Avedisian School of Medicine. For today, I wanted to talk about general guidelines for being accepted into an American or Canadian medical school. Um, the the principles will still apply if you're planning to apply to an international school. And there are some nuances if you're planning to apply to PA school or graduate school. And so if that happens to not appeal, apply, there we go, that happens to apply to you, then please feel free to ask a question in the chat. And Hiba and Kira, I'm assuming you're going to be monitoring the chat, or I'm happy to as well. Um, but I'll answer. I can answer questions as we go along as well as having the Q&A. So I'm going to share my screen. I've got a presentation, and again, please interrupt me. I'll have my chat window open as we're going along, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I think the if you need to contact me, by the way, my email is down there, jjwisco@bu.edu, and for convenience, I'll stick it in the chat as well. There we go. You're welcome to contact me there. I've worked with students from all over the world, so please don't be shy. All right. There we go. Some things to consider when you're thinking about professional school, specifically health profession school. Um, I'm going to talk about what qualifies someone for professional school in general. I'm going to do that in the framing of what I call the big five. What makes a good personal statement? I'm just going to brush on this a little bit because I want to spend most of my time on the first two topics here. But I sent somebody my slides. I can send to your other email in a PDF form, and then you're all welcome to take a look at the details there because there's more details when you talk about personal statements, interviewing, and your letters of recommendation. So those things I've done in separate seminars, but I wanted you to have that information, and then you're welcome to contact me after the fact, and then at the end of the day, what is it that you really need to know about your application session? So I'm hoping that this is a session where I might burst some bubbles. I will tell you that easily 90 to 95% of the students that come to me and ask questions are going about everything incorrectly. And it almost doesn't matter at what stage they're doing. Hopefully, you are earlier in your career. For those of you who are international students, I realize you have a little different system than the US system, but the equivalent of our freshman and sophomore years in college is typically when most students start this pathway. And by the time they get to their junior year or their third year in the undergraduate system, they're already on the wrong path. And so, one of the things that people really have to think about first is why do you want to go to medical, dental, PA, PT, pick a health profession type school? That is of utmost importance. And I'll tell you the number one wrong reason to go into any of these careers, and that is to help people. Now, that sounds weird, right? Because that's the whole reason why you want to go into it. But you can go to any career and help people. So there's something specific about the medical professions in which you can help people, and here is the key, in a certain way. And how are you going to help people in a certain way? And you really have to dig deep and reevaluate why that is. Do I want to help people because my parents did it? Noble, but it's not going to get you through the application process. Or I want to help people because I'm good at my grades. Again, it's not going to be enough to help you really qualify for these professions. And again, this doesn't matter whether we're talking about stateside, American, or international. The principles are the same. So, what do you think about? Well, the most common thing that people, at least here in the States, think about is what scores they need, what grades do they need to qualify for health profession school. And if you're asking that question, you're already on the wrong path. That is the issue. So by the time I get most students who are asking me questions about what they need to do more, they already have the wrong paradigm. So the paradigm you need to think about, in my opinion, is this is my favorite quote from W.E.B. Du Bois, who was an activist here in the United States many, many decades ago. He said the most important thing to remember is this: to be ready at any moment to give up what you are for what you might become. In other words, you want to become amazing. You want to become an amazing person. Now, at the end of the day, we on the admissions side have to measure amazingness some way. And this is what brings us to the big five, right? So we measure amazingness in academics, in leadership, service, research, and clinical exposure or clinical work. The problem that I encounter the most is that most students focus on their amazingness as their academics, and they forget about these other four things, which are so important for their who they become as people and who they become as applicants when they are on this path to health profession school. How are we doing so far? Are there any questions before we start diving into some details? Okay. All right, here we go. So what exactly does that mean? Need to re-window some things here. All right. So when we look at an application in the United States and Canadian system, there are three things that students have to submit for their AMCAS application, the American Medical College admissions uh, packet. They provide students can control their personal statement, what they write about themselves, who they are. There are 15 activities that you can list on your AMCAS application, three of which are designated as most meaningful. And then there's a little extra of a description that's included with that. The other thing that students can control are the interviews. So if they get invited to an interview, and I'll talk about how that happens in a minute, they get invited to an interview, then the interview is really about, do we like you? Right? Are you a person that would fit in well with our school? But the opposite is also true. Students should be interviewing the school and finding out whether that school is a good fit for them. That is equally important. When you think about admissions into a school, it's not a one-way street. It's not, we accept you. Because if you get the interview, then on paper, you would qualify to do well at that school. It's now a question about whether the school is the right fit for you. Um, and then the third thing is the letters of recommendation, and this triangulates everything. This is the one thing you cannot control is your letters of recommendation, other than choosing amazing people that you work with who really know who you are. And at the end of the day, all three of these things have to match or triangulate or correlate. So I like to put this little artwork here. It's the Mona Lisa in different paintings, and I just have this to illustrate to you that all of these paintings should look the same, no matter whether we're looking at someone's AMCAS application, their interview, or their letter of recommendation. And if it paints different pictures, then it sort of raises red flags for us because now we don't know who you are, right? So the only way we can know who you are is if you know who you are. And again, that boils down to, are you an amazing person or not? And as you have that in mind, think about it because you might want to know what does that mean. So here's how we measure that amazingness. All right. And I don't want you to come across with the idea that if you do really well in all five of these categories, then you must be amazing, because that's also not necessarily true. You have to really do some introspection and find out, am I ready to give of myself and to impact someone else's life and be impacted, and who is that identity, and then you're ready, to go on, right? Okay, so let's just talk about academics. I know everyone focuses on that first, and it is important because it is the triage for being invited for an interview. So, what does that mean? Academics includes your grade point average. It includes your standardized test score. In the context of medical school, we're talking about the MCAT. In the context of the other schools, we're talking about the GRE, at least in the States. And then for dental school, the DAT. I just put the law school one on here because Maybe somebody's interested in law school. Who knows? I had a student who was interested in both, so they took both tests, the MCAT and the LSAT, and decided on law school first and med school second. So, um, okay. So here is the kicker. Whatever grade point average you have, um, whether it's well, let's see, you guys are all undergraduates or undergraduate equivalent, if I'm not mistaken, right? So whatever GPA you have on the scale of 4.0, I ask because I was just mentoring a high school student who's on a weighted average. so, so your GPA percentile should match your MCAT percentile within a margin of error. So if you have a 4.0 GPA as an undergrad, then honestly, anything under a 518 on the MCAT to me would be a disappointment, right? Because a 520 is a perfect score or close to a perfect score. And so, or at least it's in the 98th to 99th percentile, which is what a 4.0 is. So if your MCAT is significantly lower, like 515 or below, then we wonder what happened. What are the circumstances that caused you to get a lower MCAT compared to your grades? There's two ways to look at that. Are your grades inflated, or did you not have the resources to succeed on your MCAT, right? Or any combination thereof. And the opposite is true. If your grade point is really low and you happen to rescue it with a high MCAT, then what happened there, right? And what's going on there? So we have to go through that filter and try to figure things out. But it does throw up a flag, a yellow flag at least in this case. Um, so I don't expect somebody who has a low MCAT or a low GPA, like a 3.2 or something, to have an extraordinarily high MCAT. It just tends not to work that way. So that also means that it is a myth that you can rescue your GPA with a high MCAT, and it is a myth that you can rescue your MCAT with a high GPA. All right, so keep those things in mind. So that's academics. And now we are going into the four areas that we really concentrate on. Because once you're past the academics part, if we think that academically you would succeed, now we're going to look at the rest of you. We're going to look at the rest of your amazingness. So let's start with leadership. So in leadership research and service, which we'll look at here, you'll be able to do lots of different activities. And we want you to focus on one activity of leadership in which you make a major contribution. You can do leadership and little things. That's perfectly fine and all worthy of being talked about in your AMCAS application. But think about one in which we can really sink our teeth into who you are. And what does that mean by a major leadership contribution? We're looking for leaders who can demonstrate that they were an agent of improvement or change through teamwork, but moreover, that they recognize and can leverage strengths and weaknesses in themselves and in their team members to accomplish something that nobody could accomplish on their own. In other words, can they accomplish as a team something synergistic that no one else could do individually? That is the mark of a really effective leader. It's also important for us to hear when your leadership failed, right? And what did you do about it? How did you adjust from those situations? All right, so service is similar. So choose one major activity to which you can make a major service contribution. This happens to be my organization, Anatomy Academy. This kid says it all and how much fun that organization is. So choose a major service contribution and keep in mind that service to the community is good no matter what you're doing. But service when you are in the process of developing human connection and facilitating that connection is big, and I would consider as significant. Service that where all parties are changing as a result of being together is a significant accomplishment. Um, the smaller little service projects, I'm not going to discount them, but you can't have all small little service projects. A good example of a small little service project might be working at the hospital volunteer desk. It's a good project, but it's nothing special, right? It's a service to the community, but it's not impactful, is how I look at it. However, if you were like working at the service desk behind a hospital and you noticed that there was a problem that needed to be solved, like you noticed that there were a lot of kids coming around, and You're not necessarily in a pediatric unit, but you notice that these kids happen to like animals, and you set up a, like an animal, a dog visitation day or something to these patients, or they could be elderly patients. Um, that's different. Now you have crossed the line, a good line. You crossed the line from being participatory and doing good work to doing impactful work, that you can claim as something that you generated, right? And then research is similar. There's going to be lots of research activities you're going to be able to participate in, but we really want you to choose one or string together a number of research projects if you want different experiences that lead to a conference research paper, a conference abstract. A scientific paper would be great, but it's not an expectation for the undergraduate years. If you do a master's degree, however, and apply to medical school, then that expectation rises. Um, because you're doing a master's degree, we expect you to publish your work from that master's degree. So, again, the bar rises when you think about research. You would go to a master's program if you went to a university that did not have research opportunities, and you definitely should do that. That's an absolute must. So, um, okay. So when I accept students into my lab, I ask them three questions. And this is me, but you should be asking yourself the same three questions no matter who you choose to go into a lab. And you want to have a conversation with the lab PI that asks you to think about these kinds of things. So the first is what is your scientific passion, right? And really be honest with that, because students who just try to get a quote unquote research experience and do anything are never productive. They don't get a whole lot of things done. Um, the second is based off of your scientific passion. What scientific question do you want to answer? And as you're speaking to someone that you want to work with, are they the right person that can mentor you to be able to answer that question? And then as you speak to them, come up with a scientific experiment or figure out if they already have a scientific experiment for which they need help. How is it that you can add value to that experiment that wasn't already thought about? Okay, so that's research. Um, some other things to think about research when we ask people on their interviews, what did you do in your research? Um, these are the common mistakes that we find is someone who does not know how to formulate a hypothesis, someone who can't describe the motivation, the techniques, the results, or the conclusion. In other words, they just showed up in the lab and pipetted all day. A superficial understanding of the relevance. If non-medical in scope, they can't explain how the experience relates to a future medical career. Oops, sorry. And so the you want to really be able to dive into research. There was a question that came up in the chat. I'm happy to answer that. The question was, for international students, research opportunities are scarce. What would you recommend for students that want research experience and real life experience, especially from developing countries? That's a fantastic question. And I'm glad you asked that because I was going to talk about some nuances that are different for those who are from underserved neighborhoods and under resourced, and certainly underprivileged. So, in your particular case, what you need to do is contact professional societies. Most professional societies have some sort of mentoring system, and there's a lot of research nowadays that can be done online. The mere fact that you're here online, whether on a phone or in a computer, is enough to get you started on some research. You do not need to be behind a scientific bench to do research. You could do systematic reviews. You could do meta-analyses. If you know how to program, you can program from wherever you're at. Programming is a really, really needed commodity. If you're an artist, we always need medical illustrators, right? And somebody that can take our ideas and make them into a cartoon beyond using Canva, right? Is really really helpful for us. So there's lots of different ways you can do research from home, but contact your professional societies. For example, I happen to be an anatomist, so the American Association for Anatomy has a mentoring program that pairs principal investigators with students who are interested in research. Especially if you're from a developing country, Like I work with a number of Nigerians and Kenyans, so there's lots of opportunities. Other societies are going to have something similar, and so you should definitely check those out. Okay, I hope I answered your question. If I didn't, please follow up in the chat. Um, yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so the rule of thumb for leadership, service, or research, you want to ask yourself this. If you were not involved in that work, would it have been able to continue without you? Now, the small things like again working at a volunteer desk behind a hospital or pipetting in a research lab or hanging out with kids who happen to be disabled at a track meet, those are all noble, but they probably would have continued whether or not you were there, right? The ones that you have impact on or influence over are the experiences in which if you were not there, that activity would not have happened. And when you're looking at the United or the American, I keep thinking United States. It's really United States and Canada. When you're looking at the American application system, of the 15 activities, as I mentioned before, you can designate 3 of those as most meaningful. Those are the ones we want you to talk about your most meaningful activities. The ones in which you had a major impact and were majorly influenced by the experience. And again, that all comes down to becoming amazing, right? You are working on these activities and you're developing as a person. All right, the last one I want to talk about is clinical exposure or clinical work. And this is the hardest one to do. I would say research is also hard, but in research, you can do that at an undergraduate university, or as the person said in the chat, you can do that by contacting somebody at a professional society. Or if you could also go to an academic center nearby if that happens to be available. It was implied from the question that that was not available. But you can look at a website and find mentors there. But clinical work is really tough because it takes so much time. I mean, when you're in an undergrad, you're working on your research because that's the one you can do at an academic center. Um, but we're looking for approximately 5 to 10 hours a week, right? That's 260 to 520 hours a year. And if you're taking 4 classes and you're doing research, that right there is already 50 to 60 hours per week. So when do you do clinical exposure? It's really hard. Um, the other thing to keep in mind is that clinical exposure is not shadowing. You still do need to shadow because we're interested to know that you understand what the profession is about. But we're talking about work in which I define as hands-on patient in some way. So if you're working as an emergency medical technician, you're running around in the ambulances. If you're an EKG tech, then you are collecting people's cardiac data. If you are working in hospice, then you're working with the patients on a daily basis. If you're working on crisis text lines, those are hands-on patient kinds of things. And you want a hands-on patient experience in which you're actually interacting with the patient and your purpose there is for healing. So where where a lot of people get mixed up is I do not consider, actually many of us, some do, many of us do not consider things like clinical research coordinators as clinical work because the end goal of a clinical research coordinator is research. It's a data point. It's not necessarily healing. I would say scribing is kind of up there for me as well, because in most scribing experiences, you're just there typing away. You don't actually have an interaction with the patient. Um, there are some scribing experiences where they do allow you to do that, and that's a totally different thing, right? But typically, you have to ask for those kinds of things. Medical assistant, you can easily get caught behind the desk and not really actually interact with the patient. That's another one of those. You want to have a clinical exposure experience where you're impactful for the purpose of healing. Not only that, but clinical work helps you learn cultural competency, how to become a diverse thinker, how to work towards health equity, all these kinds of things. In under-resourced areas, this clinical work is actually easier to achieve than research is. So you do have that little bit of an advantage because we always need clinical help in under-resourced areas. Okay. let's stop there for a second. Heba, how much is it, Heba or Heba? I can't remember. I'm sorry.
It's Hiba.
Heba. How much more time do we have?
So you're good. You still have around 20 minutes,
Oh,
15.
perfect.
Yeah, you're
Oh, I
good.
got
Yeah,
lots of time. Okay,
yeah,
great.
you're good.
Fantastic. Are there any questions for right now? Then we're gonna go on. Any others? Okay. All right. Let's go on then. Oh wait, there we go. Um, Question in the chat is working on a virtual team working towards equitable care count. I would need more of a description of what the work is, if you want to put it in the chat. Yes, as a PHS volunteer, yeah, I would say that would count. Again, it really depends on whether your online work is interacting with the patient or not in some way. I realize that that tends to be a little bit more removed, but if there's a way that you can make that patient centric, then that would help a lot. Otherwise, it's a good volunteer opportunity or a good employment opportunity. Okay. Oh, let's see. Okay. Okay. Wonderful. What about working in retirement homes as lunchtime buddy? So I would consider that more as service than as clinical work, simply because your endpoint, your end goal is not necessarily for healing, unless I'm missing something from how you described that. Um, okay. All right. I am going to keep going then. All right. Okay. So let's say that you send in your application and now I need to review that application. Here's what that looks like. So I'm going to look at these 5 areas, which again, when you're going through the process, pick activities that you're interested in these 5 areas that will help you become an amazing person. That's the focus you need to have. The subtle but incorrect difference is, what do I need to do to become a good medical candidate? Right? That's a totally different mindset. It is subtle, but it's a very different mindset. And it results in a very different type of a person, a very different type of candidate. Um, One way you can check is to see if any of the, for yourself as a self reflection, is to see if the activities resonate with you in terms of becoming someone better than who you already are. Going back to that quote that I shared at the very beginning, are you becoming a better person as a result of these activities? Okay, so um, let's take a look. Oops, I clicked on the wrong thing. Hang on. Let's take a look at the application. I lost the chat. Hang on. There we go. Okay. All right. So again, we remember these 3 things have to correlate. All right. So let's take a look at the personal statement, because that's one of the first things you can control. Your personal statement is a essentially a cover letter. It's a written description of who you are as an amazing person. And there's lots of different things you can include in your personal statement. There's a lot of wrong things to include in your personal statement, which I believe I'm going over in a second here. But think of it as your first impression on paper. You're trying to explain to me why I should be interested in reading the rest of your application. All right. So we look at whether you're a good writer, and if you're not a good writer, then I would find a writing coach. But actually, the easier way is to read. The good writers are good readers. Um, and good writers don't spend a whole lot of time texting. so the ones that actually write reflectively are fantastic writers. So go read, go write in a journal, go do something that you would do other than being on social media, and you will become a good writer. It'll just happen naturally. All right. Or get a writing coach. That could work too. All right. I want to know why you want to become a health profession. That's the first question I asked you at the outset. What is it? What is it about the profession that really excites you? That you want to apply your amazingness to that profession. Um, are you sensitive? Or do you have cultural competence? Do you have you gone out of your comfort zone? right? And in which ways have you grown as a person? Again, this all goes back to becoming an amazing person. Oops, there we go. Have you proven that you really want to become a, fill in the blank? I've had a number of candidates. Some of my favorites are someone will write about, I'll go into this in a second. Someone will write about an injury that they sustained, a knee injury. That's fairly common. They sustained a knee injury and now they want to become an orthopedic surgeon. But then there's nothing in their application that shows that they're interested in musculoskeletal injuries or people with injuries at all, right? That just doesn't fly. That's going to be really hard to convince me that you're really interested in that profession. Um, Okay. So actually, speaking about working with people, another thing that pops up is that we get a lot at Boston University because we are really interested in health equity, is someone who says, I want to reduce access barriers to care. And yet they have never worked in a free clinic. They've never worked with people different than their demographic. They've been relatively privileged. I mean, being privileged is fine, but if you want to claim that you're going to be interested in underserved medicine, then please show me that you know how to work with people who are underserved, right? And part of that comes to working with people. If you are working in a clinical environment where you're not actually working with people, then it's hard for us to ascertain whether you actually like people, right? And you don't have to be an extrovert. You just have to know how to work with people. So, okay. Do you take advantage of every opportunity available? This was more relevant when we talked about COVID, when the number of opportunities were pretty low. Or if you're in an under-resourced area or underserved area, did you work with what you had? Right? If you don't, to the participants' question earlier, if you didn't have bench research available, what other research could you do? What I care about is, do you know how to think scientifically, right? It almost doesn't matter what that experience is. There's just more common ways to do it than others. Did you enjoy the activities you did? Have you had enough life experience with getting out of your comfort zone? I brought that up earlier. Um, but again, altogether, what I really look for, no matter what you write in your personal statement, is have you become empathetic, resilient? You could also somewhat substitute for have you built grit? There's slightly different definitions, but they get at relatively the same thing. And then are you creative? In fact, this is one of my interview questions right off the bat is, demonstrate to me, tell me what you've done that has either made you an empathetic, resilient, or creative. And I'm going to be looking for that in the application because these make the best physicians, not just the best students, but the best physicians. All right, here's some things that you should and should not do. So, personal statements that are narratives talk about it in an impactful person, overcoming adversity, demonstrating some sort of cultural diversity, um, some sort of life lesson from research and or service or leadership. I should have thrown leadership in there too. These are really strong stories. Um, you want to keep your story, your personal statement to 1 to 2 impactful experiences and build a story around that. Please don't strafe your personal statement with like 4 or 5 stories or even 3 stories. It's going to dilute your statement and it's going to be really hard for me to understand who you are as a person. Here's some common misdirected stories. So I love this. Talking about marriage or your spouse or your partner. I can't tell you how many times I've read personal statements that said, being with a partner was the hardest thing in my life, and I had to learn how to work with the other person. I mean, this is part of life, right? It's not an appropriate story. Explanations for things like I got a bad grade in chemistry. It's always chemistry, and then you try to explain that away. We don't care, right? What we care more about is throughout your application, how did you work with that, and how did you grow from that? Here's my recovering from an injury story. I already gave an example of that. Um, I love this one. I helped someone else and they're better for it. This is tends to be more of an American exceptionalism kind of thing. And like people that go on medical mission trips to third world countries or whatnot, and they come back with these wonderful, impactful, yet arrogant stories that they somehow was the savior for some person in a little village. I can't stand those stories, right? They are so I'm showing my colors here, but they are so self-centered. Please don't do that. Um, Okay. I guess these days, if you're coming from a country outside the United States and coming here, I mean, that story could also happen. So, all right. A comparison of medical systems, also an exceptionalism kind of attitude. It's not collaborative. The woe is me story, the story of I went had a really difficult life, and that might be true. And there's a difference between explaining how you overcame adversity and or became a victim of your circumstances. Those are very different things. And so I call that the woe is me story. If you have that attitude, maybe you haven't figured out how to be amazing yet. I don't mean that as an accusation. I just mean that as a thought exercise. You know, think about the context of the things that you're learning within the circumstances that you're given. And then I already mentioned the multiple vignettes. Please try to avoid that because it dilutes your story. All right, so I'm just going to show this quickly. This is an example snippet from a personal statement from a former student and TA who's now in her first year residency. So I'll just read this paragraph quickly. My passion to pursue a career in medicine was further solidified by my experience as a member of the lymphedema research program. Providing care to immediately pre and post operative breast cancer patients has been where my strengths are really revealed. I've been able to empathize with patients as I'm aware of how overwhelming a cancer diagnosis can be and understand the feelings of powerlessness that may come with managing lymphedema. In actively listening to my past and future patients, I hope to support them so they do not feel alone in navigating their health journeys. Moreover, this role has assured me that a career in medicine will empower me with a depth and a breadth of knowledge to piece together seemingly unanswerable questions and will offer me life-giving opportunities to provide care for the whole person and affirm the dignity of my patients. This is just part of this person's um, personal statement. To give you a little background, this person actually had lymphedema and was really involved in different societies, different clinical groups, where she turned what was a very difficult situation for her into something where she was giving back and actively um, making an impact in her lymphedema community. Okay, any questions so far on the personal statement? So far, so good. Okay, interviewing. So there are in the states there are two types of interview formats. The multiple mini interview, that's what MMI stands for, in which case you get basically about 10 to 15 round robin questions where you interview with different people and you get a question that you have to answer within 5 to 10 minutes. And it's typically a question that is almost unanswerable. And we're not actually looking to see if you have the answer. We actually look to see how you answer. It's my favorite interviewing format, although candidates hate it. The one I will tell you that the candidates who hate it have not had the life experience through becoming amazing that they can understand how to answer the question. There is a direct correlation of that. And in the MMI interview, it takes me about 10 seconds to decide whether the person has had enough becoming amazingness to be ready for med school as far as my question is concerned. Then there's the long interview format, which is starting to go the way of the dinosaur. But this is the interview format where you're basically chit chatting with somebody for 30 minutes or so, trying to get to know each other. It's still a good format. What I don't like about it is it's heavily biased, so that the success of your long interview could depend entirely on who you happen to get that day, whether they got their coffee or whatnot. Whereas the MMI is mostly unbiased. I'm not saying it's completely unbiased, but it's mostly unbiased. So doesn't matter which format you are doing, there are specific principles to keep in mind as you're answering those questions. The first is every question is rooted in something that the school values. Is it teamwork? Is it empathy? Is it creativity? Is it cultural competence? Every question you get. And so you want to think about how you can address that value in the answer to your question. Even in the long format, someone asks you, why do you want to go to med school? Well, the value is they're trying to find out whether, you have a commitment to, that is a value of the school, a commitment to the profession, for example. Um, Always consider and discuss major viewpoints. You don't have to discuss every viewpoint, but by discussing major viewpoints and having evidence as you go along from your own life of how you would have or how you did deal with similar situations goes a long way, because that tells us that you become amazing, or we can see it in your application, we can see it in your interview. Being culturally sensitive and aware of diversity. This is important because we want to make sure that you can treat all patients, that anybody that comes to you is going to feel comfortable in having you as their caregiver. Reason using the scientific method. This is why you do the research, right? We want you to know how to solve problems scientifically. And scientifically doesn't necessarily have to mean quantitative scientific research. It could be qualitative social sciences research. To the question again earlier about you don't have bench opportunities nearby because you're under resourced, but if you did a qualitative meta-analysis that reviewed literature or reviewed interviews or things like that, that's something that can easily be done from home, as long as you have access typically to electronic devices. Um, Being personable, again, part of this is, do we like each other? That matters a lot. Um, and then keep in mind that there is no right or wrong answer to any of the questions. There is a right way to treat people as you're going about the interview, and we look for that. In fact, we often ask our admins, how's the interaction with the student and this student, this student, and if they don't like you, you're not coming to our school. Right? It almost doesn't matter what you said to the faculty or to the residents or the fourth year med students that interviewed you, because how you treat people shows up everywhere, not just when you think it counts. Um, so there's no wrong or right answer, but we are looking for how you answer the question, and there are stronger or weaker ways that you can answer the question, and that is all dependent on these 5 points above. Use your life experience. That's why you got it all. You became an amazing person. Demonstrate to us how you fit with our school. All right, so that's interviewing. And then lastly, I want to talk about letters of recommendation. Um, this is an example of a letter of recommendation you do not want. You do not want the typical letter from your chemistry professor saying, you did a great job in class. Don't do that. Right now, if you worked with a chemistry professor, and even if you failed their class or you love them a lot, go work with them, because then they'll get to know you on a deeper level. You'll get to know them. You'll get to know their work. And now all of a sudden, you're doing research leadership work. Well, probably not clinical work with a chemistry professor, but something with them where they can attest to who you are as a person and how you've become amazing. That's what a letter of recommendation is for. So here's an example snippet. I'll just read this first one. It's my privilege to recommend Jane to you as a candidate for medical school. I have taught nearly 10,000 medical, dental, nursing, and allied health sciences professional, and undergraduate students, and directly mentored almost 150 of those students. Jane is in the top 5 of all students that I've taught or mentored in my 20-year career. She's simply amazing. And then this one happens to go on to describe different things that they did, right? And then typically, really strong letters are ones that talk about the person's integrity, the person's character, and because those are the people we're looking for. The minimum requirements, everyone will have done them. I'm looking for amazing people, right? Okay, I'll skip that part. I think I got to. You guys will have all that. Okay, so some tips to close, and then I'll answer questions. I really want you to think outside of the box. And again, this goes back to, don't think about the metrics that you need to attain your goal. Think about how you're changing as a person. Focus on that. Everything else will fall into place. All right. Okay, so we already talked about why you want to be. You have lots of time to go through this process. You don't have to hurry. Dive into your passions. Serve. Get out of your comfort zone, please. That will make a huge impact on your amazingness alone. If you just did that, right? Um, let your activities speak for yourself. Again, you don't need to make excuses. In fact, I want to learn when you failed. Research is all about failure, right? I want to hear about that failed experiment. How did you overcome that? That is the more important lesson than publishing the paper, although that helps too. So, um, who did you become, right? This really makes a difference. We're not looking for perfect people. We're looking for people who want to become better and then help other people become better themselves. Okay, so that is the summary. Become an amazing person. And I think I have a few slides after this, but I'm going to stop here so we have time for questions. All right. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so
Wait, that
much for
was my
that.
last slide. Okay, well, that's convenient.
Thank you so much for that amazing presentation. Thank you so much. It was very insightful and very informative. Now we're gonna go ahead and open it for the floor for you guys' questions. Feel free to put them in the chat and we can read them out, and or you can go ahead and unmute yourself and speak your questions. Okay,
Oh,
some of the
okay.
questions we usually get how like people that are in like underserved or not underrepresented or like first generation students or someone that have moved recently, it's like a Canadian or like a United States, how can they put that on their application, highlight it just in a way that would help them to show that they did not have as much resources or abilities as other students that might have had?
Yeah, great question. So, at least in the United States, because of the Supreme Court rulings on not being able to use race as a demographic factor, and we know that race and being underserved are highly related, but we can't use specifically race. What we use instead, and we encourage you to do, is to describe your journey. Describe what you had to go through to get to the point where you are now, to being able to apply to medical or PA or dental school or whatnot, and that will give us enough information um, about whether uh, whether you're underserved or not. It'll come out. It'll come out in that. You can talk about yourself. We just can't use it as one of those checkbox metrics on the application. So please talk about yourself. Don't be shy.
Thank you.
Oh
Um,
there was a
Questions in the chat. I can read
yeah.
them for you.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Perfect. Does applying for financial aid impact your applications for undergrad degree?
No, because financial aid comes afterwards. So I will say though, I'm assuming you're an international student. So, applying as an international student to medical school, what we are more concerned about is the visa situation. So if that can be worked out, then that's not much of an issue. For instance, one of my favorite medical students that I've been working with for years is from the Middle East. And so he's an international student, had to deal with all the visa things. He was not able to get financial aid because he wasn't a U.S. citizen, and so that was an issue for him. That doesn't impact your admissions as much as it impacts your ability to choose to come to the school. And so that is a personal decision. Um, yeah, so that's not as hard for us as it is for the candidate. Oh.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, did you want to read the next one? Go ahead.
Yeah, I can read them for you. What advice would you give to someone who's uncertain about a career in medicine but wants to explore it more or further?
That's a great question. Thanks for bringing that up. I'm not saying that the others were not great. Also great questions. The first thing I would do is shadow people from the different careers. Go shadow someone from medicine, go shadow a PA, go shadow a dentist, go shadow a PT, an OT, and then talk to people in their careers. Ask them a simple question: would you do it all over again if you had the choice? And why or why not? And you're going to get different answers from different people. So don't just ask one person because you're not going to get a good enough sample size. Um, but talk to people, right? I remember this one moment. I was actually at the dentist, and my dental hygienist and I were talking about their careers, and she had obviously chosen to be a dental hygienist, and she said immediately, "I wish that I had gone on to PA school or med school." And that's heartbreaking to me because in this particular case, this person had put their own barriers in front of them, and clearly did not have a mentor that could cheer them on. So having a really good mentor helps a lot too. And if you've got that, that person can also help you navigate that question. The other thing you have to think about is that there are costs and benefits to every one of these careers. So I'll use medicine and PA as a crude example. So in medicine, it'll take 10 years to train, but assuming you don't let your profession consume you, right? Assuming that, then your choices for lifestyle, your ability to make an impact in society later on are pretty wide open. You can do just about anything. Someone who goes to a PA school, it's 2 years of training. And PA, by the way, the PA profession is amazing. But there are limitations, right? The limitation is you do 2 years of training, and while yes, you can pick any specialty, it's also much harder to stay in the profession because there are more PAs that are looking for jobs. It's much more competitive to stay as a PA, right? Unless you're really good, right? In which case you don't have to worry about it. But I had a situation where my brother, who's a dermatologist, was telling me that he and his colleague were telling me that they had to fire their PA because she wasn't available anymore and they had lots of younger candidates that could take her place. I said, "You got to be kidding me, right? That's like corporate America." But it's true. It happens even in the medical world, right? So there's a lot of cost benefit analyses that people have to think about. And I just use those two as an example. I'm not saying that either one is better than the other. Um, but just keep those things in mind because there are reasons to become a profession and reasons not to, which is why I started by saying wanting to help people is a terrible reason to go into any of these professions because it's too general, right? Okay.
Thank you. Another question here we have in the chat. What would you recommend to students who is having difficulty finding shadowing opportunities? She's from New York City and having difficulty connecting with MDs and PAs to shadow.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. Shadowing is hard. It's funny. It's easier to work in a clinic than it is to shadow. So, my strong recommendation is to get involved in organizations where clinicians are also involved. And then as you get to know people, then ask them if you can shadow, right? I mean, you don't want to make it so transparent that you're trying to get a shadowing experience out of them, but you do want to work with them to get to know them. They may actually bring it up. They might even say, I love working with you. Why don't you come by the clinic and hang out, and then you can shadow. The other way is through connections. Again, contacting professional societies around the world where there are clinicians, or even the basic scientists who know clinicians. Right? I referred people to my brother all the time. I refer people to other folks that I know that are on different coasts. That having connections makes a huge difference. So that's important.
Perfect. Thank you so much. There are another questions. There are many summer schools or research camps for high school schoolers. Would you recommend to participate in these type of programs?
So, also a great question. This one is resourced linked, though. Many of them cost a lot of money. In fact, one of the ones that I run costs a lot of money, but we got a grant for scholarships to help offset some folks' abilities to pay for the program. But there are some free ones. They're just harder to find. Um, I would recommend a camp if you cannot find another opportunity. A lot of students will do a summer research program through a university or the NIH, the National Institutes of Health here in the States. Um, I think that works a lot, but if you can avoid it by again trying to speak to a research advisor or a clinical advisor or a leadership person by not determining by helping them understand how you can add value to their work, then you are likely to get either hired or come on as a volunteer. That I think is a better route than having to pay into a program. But I'm not saying that paying into a program is a bad thing. I think there's lots of advantages to that because you can put that on your resume. You can put volunteer work on your resume as well, right? And employment, but the latter two are harder to find than a program you have to pay into. Oh.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question's about if they want to become a doctor, but they have shadowed a nurse instead, would that still count as shadowing?
Okay, so if you're going to nursing school, it counts for shadowing for nursing school. If you're going into medical school, it does not count for shadowing because you're not shadowing a doctor. I would still shadow the person to make sure that nursing versus physicianship is the right thing to do, but only the shadowing within the profession would count as shadowing. Thanks for asking that question so I can clarify that.
Thank you. Another question, how would we find a mentor who is right for us, and how do you know if that mentor is actually right?
Oh, great. Yeah, these are all great questions. My goodness. So, um, okay, so there are different kinds of mentors out there. There's the mentor who basically wants you to do everything that they tell you to do, and that can be helpful because you know what the expectations are. But if they also at the same time happen to not be interested in your development as a person, do not work with that person. I don't care if they're Nobel laureates, right? I have many students in the past who have ended up working for famous people that hated their situation because all that famous person cared about was their own productivity. The way you know whether you've got the right mentor or not is if you're working with someone who's interested in your development, right? And that's an easy thing to ascertain. Do they even care about you? Right? That is what you're looking for. It almost doesn't matter what the discipline is, although I would pick something that you're interested in because then you'll be just as productive for them. But as you interview them, quote unquote, then you'll be able to know whether they're interested in your work and what you're doing as a person, right? The other way to do it is, which I highly recommend anyway, is to talk to the other students in that person's lab, right? Ask them, what's it like here? You know, what kind of experiments do you get to do? How much freedom do you have? Um, how much does your PI trust you? What do you need to do to earn his or her trust or their trust? Um, those kinds of things, right? Again, you're interviewing them at that point.
Perfect, thank you.
Mhm.
Another question is about, is it a bad idea to like consider Caribbean medical schools?
Great. Yeah, that's great. The answer is no. I would definitely consider the Caribbean medical schools. So the Caribbean schools are, well, first of all, they have an incredibly high rate of success of getting students into the U.S. Residencies. But to get through the medical school to that point is a difficult road because so many people funnel into the Caribbean schools from the States and from international that you really have to be on top of your game to be able to be successful. I would say that there are I would say that of the Caribbean schools that I think are the most successful, the new one in the Bahamas, I can never remember the name of it. um, uh, then there's I can't remember the name. It'll come to me. Then there's the other medical school, the DeVry Medical School, and then St. George's are the three best. Um, they're excellent schools. I've had students that went to Caribbean schools. I know administrators at Boston University that went to Caribbean schools. Um, the is there a stigma to going to Caribbean schools? Yes. There's always going to be some jerk who is a residency director that will look down upon Caribbean schools because your academics don't have to be as high to get in there. But that is an old school thought that is starting to go away. Um, it's not going to go away anytime soon. I apologize, but it is a great way to get into the profession. When you were meeting with patients, they could care less whether you went to a Caribbean school or if you went to Harvard. It's not going to matter to them as long as you're a competent physician. And the Caribbean schools do a good job of that. Um, yeah, I think
Thank,
the corollary to that are DO schools. Same idea, right? DO is a different type of a medical discipline, but you're still a physician at the end of the day.
Perfect, thank you. Another question is here, can studying open courses from different universities or course websites impact your application and overall statement?
Yes, it can. So the medical schools, well, you have to look at the individual websites, but by and large, the medical schools will only allow credits from accredited institutions. So open courses are generally not frowned upon is the wrong word. They're generally not counted. They're just not counted as far as meeting prerequisite requirements. An open course, however, is a really good way to see if you are interested in the content, and you can see what the caliber is like of the content. So I'm not going to steer you away from open courses. It's just not going to count for your application.
Perfect, thank you. Another question is how important is it for a pre-health student to import non-health related activities for them within like their undergrad journey or their medical journey in general?
Yeah, so great question again. This boils down to how you want to become amazing, right? So some of the most impactful candidates that I've reviewed have done all sorts of things. They were music majors. You got to take the science courses anyway as a for prerequisites. So, but they wanted to do something with their life and develop as a person that was a little different, right? And I've seen that a lot actually, and I love it. It's great. It makes for a diverse class. It makes for an amazing person. You do what you want to do in order to find that place in life, and everything else again will fall into place. Still got to do the minimum requirements. Not saying that that's not true, right? Still got to take chemistry, physics, and biochemistry, and psychology, and sociology, et cetera, et cetera. Still got to take the MCAT, but do it on a route that you care about.
Perfect, thank you. And in terms of personal statement, as you work through it and you have multiple drafts and all of that, at what point or in what way can a person know that it's ready to be submitted?
So what you should do is take your personal statement and give it to somebody that you know, someone who can give you critical feedback that has no idea what you're writing about, right? So typically, preferably someone who has no idea what the sciences are, right? And remember, the purpose of the personal statement is to introduce yourself on paper to the admissions committee to let them know your motivation and why they would want to meet you. And if that comes across to someone who is in a totally naive field, then you've done your job.
Perfect, thank you. We do have a few minutes left. Does anybody have any more questions? You can go ahead and mute yourself or feel free to put them in the chat.
Yeah, these are fantastic. These are great. I mean, wow.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for answering my question about the Caribbean medical schools.
Sure.
So, to what extent do graduate degrees help or hurt? For example, I'm an attorney, and
Mhm.
most people tend to have an adverse reaction to attorneys in general. So, is that something to downplay, or could it be a good thing?
I would not be ashamed of for sure. I mean, I do consultation for plaintiffs and defendants for attorneys all the time. They're an essential part of the system. Um, so I would not think of yourself as any less because you're an attorney. Think of it again as that was part of your journey to become amazing. And so how is a career in law help launch you into medicine? Is it that, maybe you just hated law and you realized that this was a part of your brain that you enjoyed at the time, but now you have seen that you want to give back to the community in a different way. And so, I don't know, maybe you had a case that you worked on that was medically related that helped you realize, hey, I can add more value to that space than the current space. Or it could be, I love the law and I want to have a career where I can merge medicine and law together in some way. Like I want to go into health policy, right? There's so many things you can do as an attorney, as a
Mhm.
in the medical field. We need more of you, not less.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I will tell you also that one of my favorite students ever got her MD JD, and she was very much interested in health access barriers. One of the most thoughtful people I've ever met. Um, just a joy to work with. She's graduating this year, so I'm very excited for her.
Wonderful. I don't want to hog the microphone, so am I allowed to ask another question?
oh yeah, please go
Should
ahead.
I wait?
Whatever you
Oh,
want to go ahead, yeah.
So I've learned that medical schools seem to be very regional in the US, which is another reason I've been considering the Caribbean.
Mhm.
Are you pretty much tied to the state that you live in for
Um,
med
I'm
school
glad,
or?
yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. So the answer is no. Um, However, I typically don't get into this detail until I'm speaking on one-on-one mentoring. In the United States, I don't know if this is true for Canada, but in the United States, a state must accept 90 to 95% of their medical school class from their own state. If they're in a state, if we're talking about a state school. If we're talking about a private school, this rule doesn't matter. But if you're talking about like University of Massachusetts, where I'm from, or what's another famous medical school, state school, um, University of Miami. I don't know. No, wait, that's private. University of Oregon. There we go, where I grew up. They have to, University of Washington, they have to accept 95% of their candidates from the state, which means that if you're from Massachusetts, let me think, let's do California. That's a better example. If you're from California, you have a higher likelihood, just statistically, of getting into any of the University of California medical schools than you do Harvard, right? And even if you came from Boston and you had a 4.0 and a 520 MCAT and did everything, blah, 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 there's no way you're getting into any of the California schools, right? If you apply to UCLA, you applied, or University of San Francisco, University, excuse me, UCSF or something like that. But if you apply to Stanford, totally different story because that's a private school. They don't have to follow this rule, right? That's for admissions. You're talking about, are you tied to the state that you go to school in? Absolutely not, right? There are two exceptions to that, California and Texas. Then the reason why they're exceptions is not because of any law, it's because of the practice of the field. If you're a California medical student, whether you're state or private, right, nobody is convinced that you want to leave California. And so they tend to rank you lower on the match list. So it's really hard to get out of California once you've got into it. The same goes with Texas. The Texas cost of living is so low that people tend not to want to leave. So if you're a student in Massachusetts, let's say you got into BU, and then now, but you want to practice in Los Angeles, there's no way you're going to get in there because all the residency spots are going to be filled. For every other state in the country, people are moving around left and right, right? I would actually think about, unless you're thinking about California or Texas, I would think about places where you want to end up and find the school that will give you the most direct path to there. So another example might be University of West Virginia. Because so few people in West Virginia apply to medical school, they accept 50% from out of state to go into school there. And they send students everywhere. Right? So would they prefer that you stay in West Virginia? Yes, because they need more people, but they send people everywhere. Our match list for Boston University, which is a private school, everywhere in the country. The bias for us, though, is most of our students don't like to go to states where there are significant policy barriers to health access. So that's a thing too. Not every school does that. Ours happens to be that because our students are interested in that field. Um, if you're talking about if you go into the Caribbean, they send students for their clerkships. You do 2 years in the Caribbean schools. I believe they're all the same. You do your preclinical years in the Caribbean, which, by the way, is an adventure. It's very cool. I've taught down there on visiting professorships, and I love it. It's awesome. Um, you do 2 years there, then you do your clerkships, your third and fourth year, in any of the partner cities. So St. George's, for example, has partnerships with, I believe it's Chicago and San Francisco. So a lot of their students go there, and then because they get to know the physicians there, they typically tend to do the residencies in those cities or in the hospitals in any one of those cities. Um, DeVry, I think, is Washington D.C. and New York. You have to look at the website. I honestly can't remember for them.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I think that one's the one that is called Ross,
Ross,
right?
that's the one. Right, it's Ross.
Hmm.
Ross Medical School.
The one that I'm looking into the most heavily is AUC and St. Martin
Yeah, also a
because,
great school. Yeah.
okay, good. I have two kids and I'm trying to take them to a place they could also go to school.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
yeah. That would make a lot of sense. And those are, I'm glad you brought up the life decision kinds of stuff. Those are really important things to keep in mind. And, you know, you don't have to sacrifice so much that your kids are not going to grow up in a good environment. I think that's perfectly fine. Um,
mm.
the one I was thinking of in the Bahamas is Western Atlantic University. Um,
Oh, okay.
I would definitely check them out too. So they're also an excellent school.
Well, thank you. I'm very encouraged now.
Oh, good. I have one of my former research students is actually it happens to be at St. George's, and she is loving her experience.
That's great.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you, Emma, for your questions.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share my closing slides.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. It was very great with you today, professional. Please go ahead in the chat, reflect on something that you have learned, something that you have thought about that was very insightful, and something that you have taken information of that will help for you. If you want more some recognitions, you can feel free to submit a blog on our website. Tell us how we did, anything we can do better on, anything you want to add, something that we did good as well. All of that comments help us to be better and improving with time. Again, if you want to join us, you can feel free to join us as a student volunteer. You can join any department that you wish to join, or you can join as a team member to take a specific role and roll it with us. Donations are a very big part of our organization. So any donations that you can make, it will really help us to keep this program as free as possible and accessible to everybody, especially all of us undergrad and high school students. Anything that can help us to be better in pre-health in general, it's very helpful. So you can scan the code, donate whatever you can, and share it with people that you know that can donate. It's very helpful. After finishing this live sessions, you will be able to take the very easy 10-question quiz. It will be up on the website forever and ever. You can take it whenever you want, either today, tomorrow, or whenever you feel ready to take it. And as well with the recording of this live session. So if you missed anything, had to go anywhere, step out, you'll be able to review it and download your certificate right after you pass. Yeah. This session will be also uploaded on our live YouTube channel where you can view it anytime you want. You can also view all of our previous live sessions that we have had, and you can also take the quizzes for all previous ones as well. Be sure to catch us our social media platforms, our website, our emailing list, so you're always all up to date with everything that we have every week. That's all we have for today. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. It was great having you guys. If you still have any questions, feel free to stick around, ask it for us, and we're very happy to have you here today.
Okay, so I had a question. Could I go?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so Dr. Wisco, I am an international high school student, pre-med,
Good
and
for
thank you
you.
so much for
Dang.
answering my yeah, thank you so much for answering my questions earlier.
Sure.
So personally, I am very interested in both physics and medicine, more specifically neurology.
Cool.
And what would you tell someone struggling between two different concepts and fields when they decide on a career generally? For underserved students, making a mistake in choosing a career could go on to be a disaster. And also, you get a whole load of judgment for not choosing the typical career. So, what would you recommend?
Can you clarify for something for me? You said the typical career. Sorry, I misunderstood your accent. So, so you're asking, what advice would I give to someone who may or may not choose the right career? Is that correct?
Yes, people that generally struggle between two different concepts and fields.
Yeah. Um, I think you're young enough where you could pursue both for right now. What it is ultimately going to boil down to for you is the mentors that you end up choosing. So even the medical students, they come thinking they're going to do one career versus another, and they end up with mentoring that helps them choose in that direction. I wouldn't worry so much about you making the decision right now. Allow other people to have that influence on you, and that will help a lot. Um, as you sort of pursue both, different opportunities will open up for you that will help open up your path and will resonate with you. You want to choose a path that resonates with who you are as a person. Again, you won't know what that resonation is unless you are becoming an amazing person. So focus on that first, as you know, as usual, as I would have said anyway. And
Thank
then
you so much.
yeah, and you have
Yeah,
time.
continue.
You have a lot of time to figure that out. Let it happen naturally. You don't have to force anything.
Thank you so much. It has been such inspiring time with you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Anybody, any more questions? Otherwise, you're free to go.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much for joining us today, taking time out of your day. I've personally learned a lot and it's very informative. So thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, good. Good. I'm glad. And again, sorry I came on a little late. I was a little panicked. I couldn't find the link and I knew you had sent it to me.
No, you're all good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad that worked.